Hello, I'm Semele Sherry of Triple Moon, and this morning is a very rainy morning here in West Wales, and it's the kind of day that you want to just snuggle up inside because you can't go outside or work outside. You want to snuggle up inside, and perhaps you'd sit with friends and family and tell each other stories. And I've deliberately chosen that introduction. It seems an appropriate day to make this video because it's connected into what I want to talk to you about. So I still often have the question from clients asking me, how do I know whether it's just my imagination or whether I'm receiving inspiration from spirit? And the simple answer to that is that it's both, because your imagination is the gateway to spirit. It is the way in which spirit communicates to you, and it's been that way since the beginning of time. That's how we're kind of wired to be. I think back to when I was a child, and I used to absolutely love reading, especially magical stories, fairy tales, something with an element of the other world. And even then I had this inner knowing that what I was reading was true. The worlds that I was being introduced to through those books were just as real as the physical one around me. And as an adult, I came back to those stories, knowing that they held wisdom and deep, profound wisdom from the ancestors, and I revisited them again as an adult. So if you look at the dictionary definition of imagination, it means to picture for oneself, or to bring into image concepts, ideas, and things that are external to the senses. And the important thing here is it's external to the five senses that we use in the normal everyday world. And that means that those things, those images, concepts, dreams, are coming from another sense. They're coming from the sixth sense. And that is the sense that we use to connect to the other realms, to connect to the spiritual worlds. And so when you look at fairy tales and myths, you'll find that the gateway to those other worlds is very, very closely interwoven with the physical world around us. That's an understanding that the ancestors had, and one that I think we've lost as we've gone through the centuries. But we need to return to that now. Because if you read fairy tales, you'll find that, you know, the other world, the spiritual helper, is literally so close to where you are in the physical world. You know, it's simply a step through a doorway. It's a pathway into the woods. It's a tunnel that leads you under a hill. That is how close the other world, the spiritual realms, are. So they're very tied up with our physical world. And that's why I think I had that inner knowing within me. And so I never felt that imagination was escapism, was, you know, like just going out of yourself, out of the top of your head usually, and just escaping from the world that was around us. I always believed that magic was imbued, closely interwoven with the physical world that we're in. And indeed, if you want to know, I mean, the imaginal world, just like the physical world, it can take us I kind of shun or kind of steer away from saying positive and negative, but you know, in some ways we have to use those words in this world of duality. So they can take us in positive and negative directions. And so how do you know, how do you discern what is truthful, what is positive, and what is negative. That's the other question I get. You know, if I'm imagining it, and we are, because that is the way that we interact with the spiritual world, how do we know whether it's positive in nature? And the answer is, again, it's the same as the physical world. It's through practice and through discernment. And again, because our spiritual journey is all about learning how to live in a physical world with this physical body, the body is the best tool we've been given. So when you have a visualization, a dream, an imagining in which you see images, you're introduced to characters, they speak to you. How do you discern whether that information is helpful or not? You listen to your body. Your body will tell you. You will get, well, speaking for myself, everyone has a different response, but I will get a tug in the heart, or a sort of opening of the heart that tells me this is truth. I get goosebumps running down the back of my neck, or indeed goosebumps raise on my arms when there's a truth there. And in the same way, if there's something that is potentially not helpful for me, I get that kind of prickling response. I always imagine, well, Finn, my dog, shows me his hackles rising when there's something kind of threatening or something not helpful in his environment, and I get that same sense on my body. We don't have the hair for that to show, but I get that response, which is different from the goosebumpy feeling. So this is how you kind of don't let imagination run away with you. That's what people always say, and in some ways that's denigrating imagination completely, but there is some truth in that you need to be discerning, and you discern through the body. So yes, allow your imagination to speak to you. This is spirit speaking to you, but you then have to discern what is helpful for you and what is not. The other thing that I think is really important here is we live in a society now where we're constantly bombarded by images from the imagination. There is so much cinema, there is so much television, there is so much social media, so much literature around now, far more than there ever used to be. And so I would say you need to be responsible and discerning too about what you expose your imagination to. I mean, think back to when you were a child and you may have accidentally glimpsed a piece of a horror film. You then have nightmares. I did as a child. You have nightmares as you relive those images. So your imagination, what you're exposing your imagination to, is going to open doorways to the spirit world. And if you expose yourself to the darker side of the imagination, then you are opening a doorway to that to come into your energy field. So it's really important to understand that and to be discerning about what you expose yourself to. So let me see if there's anything I've missed that I want to tell you about imagination. I think the other thing, to go back to story, is when this information, or this wisdom, if you like, was passed on orally, it was done mostly through story. And I think, again, our ancestors knew that by telling a story, each person listening to that story would have a personal response to what they were hearing. They may imagine the characters, the landscape, and everything that happened in the story. They would imagine it slightly differently. And that's the other important thing about imagination, because it leaves us free to have a personal and unique response to what we're listening to or to what we're experiencing. And that is so very important. So again, it's why imagination is so important. Science is brilliant, don't get me wrong, but it's why I think this imaginative element is essential, because it takes us beyond what we're taught and what we're told to believe in purely logical form. It goes past the thinking brain, the logical brain, and it opens us up into more expansive realities that we can respond to in our own way. So, for example, I know over time I've had different people who are tuned in psychically will see the guides or the energies around me, and they do tend to see them in slightly different ways, and in ways that are different to how I see them. Now, I know they're picking up on the same energies. They are just using their own imagination as the filter, as the translator, if you like, through which those images come. And so neither is right or wrong. It's just the way they are interpreting through their imagination. And it's why when you're developing spiritually, you need to have that response of the imagination, because it will be true to you. It will be true to your soul and how your soul is wanting to journey with that knowledge now. And if you read fairy tales, I love the fact, as I said, that it's all so closely interwoven with the physical world. You know, it is a wood, it's a hill, it's a landscape. And it brings us back, tying into the message that I so often say, is that this physical world, the earth, our love of the earth, the landscape, and knowing that everything within it is alive with a spirit of its own, is so important. So both of those two things married together, the imagination and the imagination through the landscape, they are so interwoven, they can't be separated. And our bodies are the landscape. Our bodies are made of the same stardust that this planet is made of. So I hope that's given you some encouragement. If you're worried about, am I imagining this? Am I making it up? Yes. But it's also spirit talking to you through your imagination. So learn to be discerning, and that only comes with practice, listening to how your body responds, knowing what's a positive response, what's a negative response. Is this helpful for me? Is it not helpful for me? And allow your imagination to flow, and also be careful what you're feeding your imagination as you go on that journey. So on this rainy morning, I send you many blessings and much love until we speak again.